Let me show you the hardest failure in the world. Scott, what's your number one issue in the world? Climate change. Scott, what do you think we should do about the number one most important element to your most important subject, climate change? What do you think of nuclear, the most important variable? And I say, I haven't really looked into it. All credibility is gone. Because if you're having an entire event about let's believe science, and you haven't looked into at least the pros and cons of nuclear energy, if you don't even understand the topic, the way apparently Harris does not understand the topic, you can't make any claim to having science on your side. So here's what Yang and Booker have done right. If you're going to go out there and say, climate change is a real big problem, and science says so, and if you don't agree with science, you're a freaking idiot. So that's the Democrat argument, right? You have to be on the right side with science. If you can say that sentence, and then you can also say, and science is also very clear that at the moment, there is no better solution than a robust nuclear energy. If you can say both of those things, you're at least consistent with science. That doesn't mean you're right? That's different. But at least it makes sense. If you say, I love science, you've got to say, I agree with the scientists on climate change, but I also agree with the scientists on nuclear energy. That's consistent. But look at poor Elizabeth Warren, who's got to run on this platform. I believe scientists when they talk about climate change, but I don't believe scientists when they talk about nuclear energy. That's what she has to run on. Are you frickin' kidding me? Then it got worse for her. So Kamala was asked about nuclear power, which I'll talk about with the other candidates as well. And she demonstrated, in my opinion, that she has not looked into it. Let that register for a moment. The entire event was about climate change, the existential threat to the planet, say the people who were there. And the most important variable to whether we can solve this problem that they say exists. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just, trying to avoid the question of whether it's true or false. I'm just talking about what they believe. And the biggest variable, nuclear energy, literally the only thing that the smart people say could get us to where you need to go fast enough and is popular on both sides, Democrats and Republicans could probably get behind it. She showed that she hadn't looked into it. That's as hard as you can fail. Let me show you the hardest failure in the world. Scott, what's your number one issue in the world? Climate change. Scott, what do you think we should do about the number one most important element to your most important subject, climate change? What do you think of nuclear, the most important variable? And I say, I haven't really looked into it. All credibility is gone. Now, she didn't say I haven't looked into it, but you could tell from her answer that she had sort of a haven't really paid attention to it answer. She said, well, I'm very concerned about storing the nuclear waste. She did not say it can't be done. She did not say, and here's your tell. I'm going to give you a tell for finding out if somebody has even looked into nuclear energy. Have they even looked into it? Ask them how much real estate you would need to store all of the nuclear waste that would be generated if we had replaced our entire grid with nuclear. We're not going to do that, or even say half. Let's say to replace half of our grid or half of our power need with nuclear energy, what would be the total real estate you would need to store every bit of the nuclear waste that's made from all of that? Is it 1,000 miles? Is it 1 acre? Now, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I will tell you it's closer to 1 acre. It's a lot closer to 1 acre than it is to a mile or 100 miles or something. Now, there's certainly an issue about where you put it, but where are we putting it now? Who asked that question? Where are we putting the nuclear waste now? Because suppose the nuclear waste, all the nuclear waste we have, has filled up in its various places collectively 2 acres. I don't know if it has taken that much, but let's say all of it together takes 2 acres. What if we just put a few more barrels where that stuff already is? Are people going to complain extra because you put some extra barrels there? I'm not sure there's any problem there. I feel as though she hadn't looked into it. She just took the top level things she'd heard. I'll say something about nuclear waste so I don't have to commit to nuclear power because I don't know how to defend it. Totally didn't know the most important topic. So Kamala Harris, I'm going to say, this is why you listen to me. This next thing I'm going to say, I don't know if I'm going to say it. Yeah, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it for entertainment. I'm going to say this is an opinion, right? So the next thing that comes out of my mouth cannot be supported by science and facts. This is purely an opinion. Kamala Harris has a submissive personality. That's it. Now, you don't have to, take that into the bedroom for your interpretation, but the fact is, she has a submissive personality. You can see it in her body language. You can see it in the way she talks. And I don't see that she has a fire in her belly to be a leader. She looks like a follower, and she looks like she would be more comfortable as one. Now, that's an opinion. But remember, the voting public is going to be looking at all these characters, and they're going to be forming opinions which are not always fact-based. Some of it's just the impression you get. So I guess that's as far as I'll go. I'll say it's the impression I get, but of course I can't read her mind, right? So I can't know that it's true because I can't see what's in her head. But what she's projecting is pure submissive energy. And there's just no way that becomes president. So I'm not going to change my original prediction that she gets the nomination because that wouldn't be fair. Because nothing, I made the prediction based on the people above her being completely unelectable. That's still true. But it might be that whoever gets the nomination is even lower in the ranking than Harris is because they might have to go right over her. All right, let's talk about the other people. Let's see. Bernie Sanders is anti-nuclear, and Elizabeth Warren are both opposed, but in different ways. Warren said that she would oppose nuclear energy as a way to combat climate change, should she get elected. And she said, we're not going to build any nuclear power plants, and we're going to start weaning ourselves off of nuclear energy and replacing it with renewable fuels, Warren said, adding that she hopes to phase out nuclear power by 2035. That is basically surrendering the country. Let me give you an argument that you haven't heard, but you're going to hear more of it. Sometimes I cheat because I know about things before you do. So I can tell you what's coming before you see it. Here's an argument that you haven't heard before, that you're going to hear for the first time. And when I tell you, you're going to say this: oh, shit. You ready? You're going to say that to yourselves quietly, or maybe out loud. But as soon as I tell you this way of thinking about nuclear energy and the future of the United States, you're going to say, oh, shit, I didn't think about that. Here it comes. Space Force. You can't militarize space without nuclear power. And you're not going to be able to dominate space without having a very robust nuclear industry that's not only producing nuclear experts, but has enough of them that some of them are working on Space Force. If we don't have military control of space, we will have given it away to China, to Russia, maybe to India, maybe to somebody else. Look at the comments. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. If you let your nuclear industry atrophy, which is Warren and Sanders' intention, they are intentionally ceding outer space to our biggest military opponents. If we give up outer space, we're also giving up the country, because whoever owns space owns the planet. There's no getting around that. Whoever owns space around the planet is in control of the planet for all practical purposes. Because it's hard to shoot stuff up, but it's kind of easy to shoot stuff down, if you know what I mean. So I would say that Warren and Bernie have explicitly surrendered the United States to China. I mean, that's as clear as it could possibly be. If you don't have a robust and continually improving nuclear industry, you can't populate space. Can't be done. So we'd be giving up space. You hadn't heard that before, had you? Tell me you've ever heard that argument before. You're going to hear it in the future. So mark my words on that. Here's the most fun part. Both Cory Booker and Andrew Yang are, I guess I could say, pro-nuclear. I guess I could say pro-nuclear. Now, Yang gets to another level of detail. So Yang talks about thorium, and there's a conversation about whether thorium is the future or it has problems. But he at least knows what it is. How many of the candidates running for president could have a conversation about thorium reactors compared to standard light water reactors? How many could even be in the conversation? I think two. Probably Booker, because remember, Booker is super smart. And he said explicitly, here's what he said about nuclear, it needs to be part of the fight against climate change. And he said, blah, 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 the people who oppose it are, quote, aren't looking at the facts. So Cory Booker, brilliant guy, even if you don't like his politics, even if you don't like his style or whatever, he's a brilliant guy, like super smart, credentials for educational credentials, etc. And he says that you could only be against nuclear energy if you haven't looked at the facts. Ouch. How do any of the non-nuclear candidates, how do they contrast with that and not look like troglodytes? Because first of all, they don't understand climate change. They just know what people are saying about climate change. And they certainly don't understand the primary variable that could change the climate change situation if it's what scientists say it is. So I have to say that Cory Booker and Andrew Yang just rose above the crowd. Because if you're having an entire event about let's believe science, and you haven't looked into at least the pros and cons of nuclear energy, if you don't even understand the topic, the way apparently Harris does not understand the topic, you can't make any claim to having science on your side. So here's what Yang and Booker have done right. If you're going to go out there and say, climate change is a real big problem, and science says so, and if you don't agree with science, you're a freaking idiot. So that's the Democrat argument, right? You have to be on the right side with science. If you can say that sentence, and then you can also say, and science is also very clear that at the moment, there is no better solution than a robust nuclear energy. If you can say both of those things, you're at least consistent with science. That doesn't mean you're right? That's different. but at least it makes sense. If you say, I love science, you've got to say, I agree with the scientists on climate change, but I also agree with the scientists on nuclear energy. That's consistent. But look at poor Elizabeth Warren, who's got to run on this platform. I believe scientists when they talk about climate change, but I don't believe scientists when they talk about nuclear energy. That's what she has to run on. Are you frickin' kidding me? Now look what Trump, Trump doesn't do a good job with nuclear. He just doesn't really talk about it much. But here's what he could do against that. Well, Elizabeth, I'm glad you're picking and choosing your science. So you like science when it happens to fit your socialist ideals in climate change, but you don't like science when science proposes a solution for the very thing you think is a problem. Why do you like science sometimes and sometimes don't? Here's what I say. I say that reasonable people can disagree on the science, but reasonable people cannot disagree with the following statement. Nuclear energy is the only way we know to meet our nuclear needs in a clean energy way, because it's consistent power as opposed to irregular power of renewables. Now, if President Trump said that, he would not have to have an opinion on climate change, per se. He could just say, well, whether you have climate change problems or not, you're still going to need the energy. You still want your energy costs to go down because that's good for the poor. It's good for the poor if energy costs go down. And we need a consistent, reliable network, etc. So the president has a very consistent statement, which is, we can't be sure about climate change, but we are sure that there's only one known way to get us to cleaner, better, abundant, cheap energy. And so let's do it.